So welcome everybody who's attending this event online. Our main audience is actually in person. Stratton is in the Masai Mara right now with the team. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction here to the online audience, and I will be handing over directly to Stratton. So we have Stratton Hatfield talking today from the Mara Raptor Project. And his obsession with birds started very young, around 6 or 7 years old. And he is studying his PhD at Wageningen University in Holland, and he's looking at martial eagle ecology in the Masai Mara. So hence that is where he is right now. The Mara Raptor Project evolved from that, and martial eagles are one of his favorite birds. He's been there for 10 years. He manages the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust programs in this ecosystem. And one of his priorities is capacity building. And this is what these types of events do. He invests in passionate individuals from local communities because he believes, like we do at Share Screen Africa, that they are the future of conservation in Kenya. He has a strong and dedicated team and is always open to others who really want to work for the protection and conservation of birds of prey across Kenya, but also across Africa. If you are in the Masai Mara and you happen to spot his Land Rover, feel free to ask him any questions that you want. And Stratton, with that, I will hand over directly to you.
Thanks so much, Holly. And good morning, everyone. And so today's talk is going to be a bit interesting, like I said to the group before, I think everyone else arrived, but we're both online and in person. So if you see me running to my computer to do anything weird, just know that I'm speaking to people online and dealing with a technical problem. But my name is Stratton Hatfield. I work for the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust. I'm a program manager for Southern Kenya. And one of the projects that we have is called the Mara Raptor Project. The Mara Raptor Project grew out of my PhD studies that I'm currently finishing up. I've been working on martial eagle research for the last kind of 6 to 7 years in the Mara ecosystem. That project is kind of wrapping up, but what's grown out of that project is a much broader raptor conservation initiative. And that's what I'm very excited to talk with you all about today. The overall kind of mission of the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust and also of the Mara Raptor Project is to secure healthy raptor populations in Kenya. And so you'll see that theme. I'll discuss that theme quite a bit throughout the talk. All right, let's get going. I think the not working. Yes, there we go. The first question that kind of lots of people ask me is, well, what is a raptor? And I'll pose that question to the audience right now. Can anyone tell me what a raptor is? It's a bird of prey. That's a synonym now, Jane. So what is a bird of prey now? Yeah, a bird that eats meat. So that's a very good answer. Anything else? So I'm going to pose the, yes, Mwalimu. Yes. 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 So Mike Kahiga, one of the teachers in the audience, says that that it's got really good eyesight. It's got the ability, a sharp bill to eat meat, and also very sharp talons, and all of that is correct. My argument to all of those, though, is why isn't a kingfisher then a raptor? A kingfisher eats meat. A kingfisher has little talons. A kingfisher has a sharp bill, and it also has got keen eyesight. So it's an open question, I guess, is my point. Yes, another answer. Yeah, so that's also good. But then I would ask you, what about an owl or a pygmy falcon? So my whole point in this, so scavengers, so that's also an interesting point. Are vultures raptors? I guess my point in all of this is the exact definition of a raptor is debatable. And I think it's not exactly settled in the literature. Some colleagues of ours at the Peregrine Fund published a lovely paper a year or two ago where they discussed kind of the evolutionary lineage of raptors. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I'll just talk to you a little bit about how we define raptors within the context of our work. So the word raptor, and this is quite nice if you're a guide, is derived from the Latin word raptar or rapto, which means to seize violently and drag away. So that's quite a nice, if you're a guide and you're going out into the field and you see a raptor, a little bit of information you can share with your guests. I think broadly, the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust, and so does the Mara Raptor Project, all of these kind of species groups we consider raptors. So eagles, snake eagles, and a batalure is kind of like a snake eagle and an eagle. Hawk eagles, hawks, goshawks, sparrowhawks, harrier hawks, harriers, buzzards, kites, cuckoo hawks, honey buzzards, vultures, the osprey, the secretary bird, owls, falcons, hobbies, and kestrels. All of these species groups we consider to be raptors. So, when you see Mara Elephant Project or you see Mara Predator Conservation Project, they focus on either one species or a few species. But, in the Mara, how many species of raptors is slightly debatable because we get vagrants, but you're looking at between 60 and 70 species of raptors. It's a huge amount of species. Each one of them has a unique role to play in the system. So it's a lot of work. So when we say we're the Mara Raptor Project, it's a huge thing to say. And it's something that, wow, we've taken on quite a bit of work here. All right, the next question that I often get asked is, why raptors? So, you're in the Mara. The Mara ecosystem is famous for lions and elephants and for the lovely culture of the Masai people. Why raptors? The first reason, and one of the reasons that really motivates me, is that raptors are species of conservation concern. And so what I mean by that is they're species that are declining rapidly. So when I ask, what is the most threatened species group within the ecosystem, within the greater Mara where we are, I would argue raptors are right up there at the very close to the top. If it wasn't for poaching, rhinos would not be rare, right? So, raptors are very, very sensitive species. Many of them are in enormous population decline. We'll talk about that more later on. Lots of species are critically endangered. Most of our vultures are critically endangered or endangered. The species I studied for my PhD, martial eagle, is endangered. Species right on the brink. Raptors are umbrella and indicator species. So what that means is that if you protect raptors, you protect a whole suite of other species underneath them. So just like we talk about how lions and elephants are umbrella and indicator species, so are raptors. We'll talk more about that later in the presentation. Raptors are cultural icons. And I know there's some volunteers here from America. I know someone's here from California. There's nothing more iconic in America than the bald eagle, right? Full of bald. And everyone's like, that's the symbol of America. So raptors are cultural icons to people all across the world. In Kenya, if you look at our defense ministry, at their emblem, there's an eagle. Eagles are symbols of strength, symbols of power. And so we protect them because they're of cultural importance to us. And I think that's quite a special thing. Raptors are crucial to ecosystem function and health. What do I mean by that? If we were to lose raptors, we would have problems. And there's an interesting study that I think should happen in the Mara. I hope can happen in the future. We're seeing hyena numbers going through the roof, right? Hyenas are really increasing and vulture numbers are really dropping. So with vultures going, is there a surplus of food and the hyena populations are going up? How's that connected to lion populations? These are interesting things. Do vultures actually remove diseases from the system? How many rats and mice do auger buzzards and long-crested eagles take from our fields and protect our crops? So raptors serve a very important role within this ecosystem. They really, they're part of this system's health and function. And the fifth reason is conflict with growing human populations. So just like lions and elephants and baboons and all of these other species, where we call it human-wildlife conflict, I almost want to call it competition with people. We're competing for the same resources. But I think here, and if you're from Ndonyarinka, which I know half the audience is from Ndonyarinka today, I think you all might be familiar with martial eagles taking chickens, or crowned eagles taking sheep and goats. But these eagles are predators, and they're predators just like lions and leopards are, and they're killing livestock and domestic poultry, in some situations even more than terrestrial carnivores. And this poses real challenges for conservation, and we need to study these species so we can understand that more, so we can prevent that conflict and promote coexistence. So what are raptors and why raptors? A little bit about the Mara now. Why the Masai Mara? So I think this is a map that's very familiar to everyone here. To the audience online, this is the map of the Greater Mara region. Exactly what the boundary is of the Greater Mara region is slightly debatable. It's something that I'm actually working right now to try and define, what is the area we call the Greater Mara? But broadly, it's an area of around 3,000 square kilometers. It's kind of highlighted by the National Reserve, which is here, and that includes the Mara Triangle. And then it's also got a whole, bunch of community-owned wildlife conservancies to the north that are under various management, regimes, and it's complicated. But it's an incredible place. The blue dot is roughly where we are in Pardamat. And so the Pardamat, community conservation area is fairly unique in the Mara. It's an area whereby people and wildlife are trying to coexist. It's a learning process. It's not perfect, as I'm sure you all are aware. But why raptors from the context of raptors? Well, the Mara has a few things that are quite special about it. One is we spoke about its size. It's quite large, 3,000 square kilometers. It sits on the edge of the great Mara Serengeti ecosystem. The Serengeti, of course, being almost 10 times the size of the Mara. So you're looking at one of the most vast and intact, landscapes left on our planet. It's very unique in that, especially the northern part, the Mara, we have a bimodal rainy season, which means we get two distinct rainy periods. Sometimes they merge into one, and we just have one really long rainy season. With climate change, as we all know, our rains are becoming a bit more unpredictable, but nevertheless, we still get a lot of rain. You're talking about someone's from Kauai. In Kauai, we get 1,000 millimeters or more. It's almost a rainforest in Aquari. And then if you go towards Olokine and Nabosho, you get acacia comifera woodland down into the 600 millimeters, 700 millimeter range. So we've got a lot of water here. We're right at the equator. And what that means is we get roughly the same amount of sunlight every single day of the year. And that's, for those of you from the global north, you know that's not always the case. But for those of us that are from here, we take it for granted. But that 12, 13 hours of daylight every single day really is productive. It allows things to grow all the time. So with rain and with sunlight, it's an extremely productive system. Also, our soils, we don't talk a lot, but we've got very rich volcanic soils in many places. And so what that means, rain, sunlight, rich soils, it's an extremely productive system. And with that, we have a lot of diverse habitats. We've got a lot of diverse flora and fauna. And you think about the Mara, the density of lions, the density of elephants, the density of our game here. My wife and I were just in Savo, and we drove for hours, and we saw 10 hartebeest and 10 zebra. And you rock up in the Mara, and in 2 minutes, you've seen that. So this is, one of the most productive places on the planet. And with that comes an enormous amount of raptors. We've got over 60 different species of raptors represented here in the system, including, for some species, some of the highest populations potentially in the world, or at least the densest. Not the highest, but the densest. It's a relatively small area. So I know this is hard for people in the audience to see. I'm guessing people online can see this without any difficulty. But I'm going to pose some questions to the audience right now. Can anyone identify any of these raptors here on the screen? And feel free, just throw guesses. If you'd like to walk up and look closer, feel free to do so as well. So we definitely have, we have a hawk here. We do not, we have an eagle, we have an owl. Any idea on the species though? I know this bar is probably obstructing people in the audience's view here. I'll go. So this is the Western banded snake eagle. It's a very special raptor that we've got a nice population here in the Mara. I thought the snake might give it away. This species here is an African marsh harrier. We have a few pairs of African marsh harrier in the Mara. This is, in Kenya at least, a critically endangered species. In other parts of Africa, they're more common, but very special bird. This is a pearl-spotted owlet, one of our smallest owls in the Mara. I know this is blocked for many of you here in the audience, but this is an Ovambo sparrowhawk. They're a very cool species that breeds in forest patches, but hunts in the open plains. And they love hunting on the edges of roads. And this in the bottom right is one of my favorite birds. That is a white-headed vulture. And white-headed vultures are a critically endangered species. Total population in Africa, very similar to that of the black rhino or the African wild dog. In the Mara, we are down to probably less than 10 birds. So right on the brink of going extinct in the ecosystem. I think if we would have 20 birds, I would jump up and down for joy. We only know of about 8 at the moment. So it's not looking good for white-headed vultures. Okay, so we've talked about raptors. We've talked about why raptors. We've talked a little bit about how the Mara has lots of raptors. So what is the Mara Raptors Project's approach to conservation here in this system? How are we, trying to bring healthy populations of raptors across Kenya? But there's 4 things we do. The first thing we do is single species research projects. So like my PhD. So a lot of the raptor species that exist in the Mara are very poorly known. We know very little about them. And so we're trying to conduct these very specialized projects on them so we can learn more about species. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a few minutes. The next thing we're doing is broad conservation work through nest monitoring and protection. So nests of these birds are extremely valuable real estate in the landscape. And by knowing where they are, monitoring those nests and protecting those locations, we think that that's the best approach to protecting them into the future. So nest locations are extremely important. Nest monitoring is critical. The third thing we do is poisoning response. So the broader Kenya Bird of Prey Trust has a very, very, very successful and I think remarkable raptor rehabilitation, rescue, and release program. And how we support that program is through poisoning response and rescuing poisoned birds on the ground. So poison is one of the greatest threats to vultures. And unfortunately, we deal with poisoning issues far too frequently. And I spoke, some of you are from Old Kinye. Old Kinye has been a very difficult place for poisoning in recent years. And yeah, it's difficult. We'll talk more about that later on. The fourth thing we do, and something I'm very passionate about, is capacity building. And what do I mean by that? I think I want everyone in the Mara to love raptors as much as I do. And not only love them as much as I do, but know them more than me. I want people to really, when they see a raptor, they go, wow, that raptor is so important. It's just as important as a lion and an elephant. And so capacity building has many forms. So one is just that general love of raptors that I really want everyone here to love them as much as me. I try my best. But the second is I think that in order for raptors to be conserved here, I'm the wrong person to do that, right? I'm not Masai. And so I really think we need a generation, we need a whole group of Masai conservationists who love raptors to lead that charge. So fortunately, part of our team, unfortunately, he cannot be here today. We've got a gentleman by the name of Lemaine Parmuntoro, or Lemaine Pa. Lemaine manages our project here in the Mara. And he's an amazing young man who's doing incredible things for raptors. But we're also starting to look to expand. So we're hoping that in the back, Rakwa will join our team at some point, and we'll really become a voice for conservation here in Pardamat. We've hired someone in Nabosho. We're looking to hire people other places in the Mara. Who knows? Maybe one of you all can one day join our team. That would be something that I would be excited at some point to talk with you all about. All right. When I say capacity building, though, I also want to say it's also about the science. It's every level. Like I see myself as a pseudoscientist. I'm not a great scientist, and I hope that some of you can come and learn science way better than me. We really just need young people, old people, everyone to care about raptors and to really put this high on their agenda. Cool. All right. So I spoke about the 4 things we do, and what I'm going to do is walk through each of those 4 things for the rest of the talk. And so we'll start with single species research projects, and I'll introduce you to the martial eagle, which is the species that I was fortunate to study for many years. This is a martial eagle. You can identify them. They've got this lovely barring and speckling on their chest and legs and belly. They've got piercing yellow eyes. This is an adult and a male. He's just killed a hare. My colleague and I, Shiv Kapila, were fortunate enough to see this kill. But yes, martial eagles are fantastic predators. The focus of my PhD has been really asking the question of how predatorial are they? Are they the apex predators like lions and leopards that I think they are? And I'm going to try and defend that case. The first thing I'd like to talk with you all about before I get into actually my research is that martial eagles, as many raptors, exhibit something called reversed sexual dimorphism. And so what that means is that the females are much larger than the males. So female martial eagles weigh approximately 4.6 kilograms, and males weigh approximately 3.4. That's a huge difference. It's like 25% to 30% larger. On the right, you can see a female foot of a martial eagle. That hind talon is one of the largest killing utensils in the system. So I think the only thing that really compares to it in length is potentially a Nile crocodile tooth, one of the old Nile crocodiles. But if you took like a lion claw or a lion canine and you stuck it up to that, it wouldn't beat that. So that's pretty impressive. crowned eagle talons, right up there with martial talons. Okay, so keep in mind throughout the talk, female martial eagles larger than males, and it's called reverse sexual dimorphism. So the first thing we did as part of my PhD research is we drove around the Mara, and martial eagles are a species that occur at very low densities. They fly, which makes them very hard to follow. So you can try and sit in your car with a pair of binoculars and follow them all day long, but it's not going to work. They fly thousands of meters above the ground. They fly at speeds exceeding 200 kilometers an hour. So good luck. So the only way we could actually follow them and understand where they were going and what they were doing was using transmitters. And these transmitters are not transmitters in the traditional sense. When you see a lion or an elephant with a collar, typically those transmitters are just collecting GPS data. That is changing, but in the bird world, we've been doing something on raptors for a little bit longer, and that is we have these solar-powered devices that are very small. They weigh 27 grams, and they allow us to collect an enormous amount of data, much more than a traditional collar. So we collect something here called accelerometer data. But have any of you on your phones, if any of you have an iPhone or a Samsung Android phone, they can tell when you're walking or when you're running or when you're doing something. They have this ability to know your behavior by the way the phone moves, right? I don't know if you guys have seen Apple Watches or Fitbits or you've seen anyone with that. But essentially the idea is that there's a little device in that device that based on how it moves, it can know what you are doing. So if I'm running like this, the device knows. If I'm walking, the device knows. If I'm jumping, the device knows. That's essentially what we put onto the backs of eagles. So we call these devices like, I don't know, I call them the Fitbit, an eagle Fitbit. But what it has allowed us to do is see every location that these martial eagles kill. And by seeing where they're killing, we can go to those locations and we can identify what they're killing, the size of the prey that they're killing, lots of different things regarded to what they're eating. It was the only way we could really come to grips with their diet throughout the year. And yes, of course. So the question from the audience is, how did we get hold of this? We catch them with a trap called a balchatri trap. And it's essentially a domed cage and with bait inside. So, all right, so what did we find? The first thing we did is, you can imagine me, I told you already, I'm not a great scientist and I'm not a great data scientist. So, we got all this accelerometry data. We were building what we call a behavioral classification algorithm. And this algorithm would tell us a martial eagle has killed here. A martial eagle has killed here. And the data scientist on our team, her name is Allison Davis, was telling me with great confidence that just that data set alone was great. Through training data, we were very confident. But I was like, no. Let's go out into the field and let's really test it. I want to see this with my own eyes. And we'd already been doing it without the algorithm, but we did it with the algorithm. And what the algorithm essentially told us 96 kill locations. And we went to those 96 kill locations within 48 hours of the kill. And we found kills at 89 of those locations. So that's really high accuracy. So we were very pleased with this result. But this is something called, we were looking here for false positives. So when it says that there's a kill, but if we go there, there is no kill. Do you get what I mean? So it's a false positive, but what we were missing was the false negatives. The good thing though about the Mara is that there are lots of people driving around the Mara with big cameras taking pictures of eagles eating. And so we were able to comb social media and find a whole bunch of kills that we didn't know about. And we were able to speak with those people and figure out where the kill was, the time of the kill, the location of the kill, all of this information. So we received 31 unsolicited citizen scientist reports of our birds eating. And these are there were a lot more, but these were the clean ones. And of those kills, our algorithm found 29 of them. So our false negative rate was also really good. So using our machine learning behavioral classification method, we knew that the method was solid. We tested it in the field and it also was solid. We're pretty happy with our method. So what we figured out is we know where martial eagles are eating. If we go there, we can figure out what they're eating. We can figure out things like how frequently they're killing, how often they're feeding on kills. This algorithm has opened up a whole world of possibilities for us to understand martial eagles. Okay, so this was the method. We were able to catch in total 28 martial eagles using this method. I'll explain later that 28 is over half of the total number of eagles in the Mara. So it's a really good sample size. And what we figured out is that male martial eagles during the non-breeding period, when they're not killing, are able to kill 0.59 kills a day. Females are killing less, 0.38 kills a day. And that's strange, right? Because females are bigger than males. But males are killing much smaller prey, 1.7 kilos. Females are killing much larger prey, 3.8 kilos. So while females are killing slightly less than males, they're compensating for that by killing much, much, much larger prey. And so what we were able to figure out is that males, by a large percentage, prefer game birds, so smaller things. So guinea fowl, francolin. We also saw that they really liked hares, mongoose, bustards. That's what males are eating. But females are killing much larger prey. They're killing small ungulates, impala, Thompson gazelle, Grant's gazelle, warthog piglets, and lots of other stuff. So 37% of the diet of a non-breeding female martial eagle is small ungulates, is what we figured out. This is rough. But what that represents is around 52 small ungulates a year. And so when we're talking about ecosystem impact, I would argue that a single martial eagle is having a pretty significant impact on ungulate populations. I mean, 52 young Thompson gazelle, young impala a year is not insignificant. It's a lot. When you try and stack them up and compare them to leopard and cheetah and lion, I mean, of course, leopard, cheetah, and lion are much larger. They kill much larger prey. They eat a lot more. They consume a lot more. But what's interesting is if you control for age class. So if you say that, okay, forget age class. So martial eagles are killing 52 ungulates a year. We don't really know how many ungulates leopard and cheetah are killing, but there was a study done in the US on pumas where they brought all this literature together on puma foraging, and they estimated that an adult male puma in Colorado and California and places like that kills roughly 50 ungulates a year. And so that's 50 adult ungulates. This is 52 young ungulates. But it's quite interesting. And so are they identical to these big predators? No, but they do come close. And I do think what's quite interesting about martial eagles is they kill the big predators, especially the cubs. So this is a juvenile martial eagle. This photo was taken by Jess Lefcourt. She was with Earth Ranger. But this is a juvenile martial eagle with a lion cub. And so we've got 7 records, or actually we've got more. We've got 9 records of 7 observations of martial eagles killing lion cubs. And so when people say, I saw a martial eagle kill a lion cub, that's true, 100%. Martial eagles take cheetah cubs. Martial eagles take leopard cubs. Martial eagles take wild dog pups. The only record we don't have is a martial eagle taking a hyena pup. So hyena maybe are the top. But I find this quite interesting. So you've got martial eagles killing a lot of big prey, especially females, and they're also predating on the apex predators. The other thing that's quite interesting is that they have very few predators. A martial eagle as an adult, almost nothing kills it. So I really do think that martial eagles are apex predators right at the top of the food chains alongside lions and deserving of recognition of that. So when you see a martial eagle in the bush, especially when you future guides when you're out there, you see it, tell your wagon, this martial eagle can take a lion. So, a baby one. But just say that, take a lion. It's a bigger dramatic effect. I'll get to that. I'll get to that. Okay, so a byproduct of all of this research studying foraging ecology was looking at how martial eagles are spatially distributed throughout the system. So what we realized very early on in the study is that martial eagles form territories, and these territories are very defended. So when we started tagging a bird, we would tag a bird here, and then we would go, okay, there's another bird here. And we started realizing all of these territories fit together like a puzzle across the landscape. And what we've come to realize is that there are about 22 pairs of martial eagles within the Greater Mara. So roughly 44 adult breeding birds, plus or minus 1 pair, 2 pairs on either side. So you're talking about a total adult breeding population in the system of about 44 eagles. And you can kind of see this distribution in this map here, 1 territory, 1 territory, 1 territory, 1 territory, 1 territory. It really is a puzzle across the landscape. Now, when you compare that to other predators, in the entire Greater Mara, we think that there are about 500 lions over the age of 1. We think that there are around 35 cheetah, 30 cheetah, right? We don't know leopard. So martial eagles are at roughly the same density as cheetah. I think maybe a little bit more is what I would think about them in the system. So if you take Nabosho, which is a very close conservancy, Nabosho has roughly I don't know the numbers, have to talk to the predator program, but 35 to 55 lion. Jane might know more than me. So closer to 100. And the Borscha's got stacks of lions. It's got 2 marshal eagles, just 2, right? So these birds require vast, vast areas. The average home range size for these birds is roughly 175 square kilometers. And that's a pretty defended territory. So in order to protect the marshal eagle population, you need big, big, vast home ranges. The other thing that we found is that they're largely incompatible with people. They will not nest near people. And they really, really struggle in areas where people have moved in. And so they're a species that really relies on the core of our protected areas. So if you take Naborsho Conservancy, they nest right in the center of the core area of the conservancy, where there's no grazing, as far away from people as possible. Even though the tree quality in the center of the conservancy that they require for nests, we'll talk more about that, is poor. So that's very telling about these birds. Another cool thing we found is Marlene Mukahiga in the back said that they have keen eyesight, and that's true, but how keen? It's an interesting question. This is just anecdotal data, but it's fun. This is high resolution GPS data taken every second. This is a marshal eagle flying at about 500 meters above the ground. It makes a very distinct turn at this point and then descends rapidly, boom, down to the arrow on the right-hand side of the screen. Can anyone guess the length of that red line? Any guesses? I can tell you, so what we think is that from that turn all the way down there, that eagle saw something at that turn and then descended rapidly. I hope you all would agree with that basic piece of logic. That red line is 7 kilometers long. 7 kilometers. So they're making decisions at 7 kilometers plus in the landscape. They're able to see things like we can't even imagine. And I think that's something really important to realize for raptors. Their eyesight is something so incredible that we can't even comprehend it. We think, based on a paper published in the 70s, funny enough, that marshal eagles can identify a 1 meter by 1 meter object from anywhere between 12 and 15 kilometers away. So when they're flying thousands of meters up in the sky, can you imagine that they can see every marshal eagle in all these neighboring territories? So from a territoriality perspective, when these marshal eagles fly, it's this ping pong social network effect across the landscape. They're going, hi, are you there? You're still there, you're still there, you're still there. These territories are all maintained by eyesight and visual displays. So it's a whole new way to think about raptors when you see them flying. Their eyesight is incredible. It's a great question. So the question from the audience is, are marshal eagles all over Africa? So what you find is that they're in savanna-like habitats throughout most of Africa south of the Sahara. So you do see them on the edges of forests. You do see them in Afro-alpine vegetation. You do see them pushing into deserts. But essentially, they do require some level of openness to the vegetation to forage. Yeah. Great. Okay. A couple other things that we've done with marshals. We've stuck cameras in their nests to get an understanding of their breeding diet. We're currently analyzing these data. And what we think is that during the non-breeding season, they're killing much larger prey than in the breeding season. And that's largely because during the breeding season, the male is the primary forager. So they're delivering the food to the nest. But also, if they're having to fly 4 kilometers with food, that prey needs to be smaller and more portable. A female cannot actually fly with an impala. And that's a huge limit to her ability to move food around. So this is Lemaine, and I just wanted to show this video to you all in the audience as inspiration for your work. Can you hear this? No, you can't. Hello. I'm so happy. This is my first marshal nest climb, putting the camera in it. And he says he made it. But this is Lemaine, our project manager. Hey guys, welcome. Karibu. We just had some people join the audience to those online. But this is Lemaine, and Lemaine is climbing into the nest now on his own, technically, putting up cameras and studying these birds. And so I hope that's all an inspiration to you all. But to me, this is just amazing. And these are some of the pictures that we're taking. So remember how I said marshal eagles are killing top predators? We're also learning that leopards are killing marshal eagles. So we've got several images now of leopards killing and eating marshal eagle chicks. I love this picture of Kicheche down here and down in the bottom, watching this entire kill take place. But it's something that happens not frequently, but every once in a while. One other little piece about martial eagles. As part of our program, we've banded some birds, so put leg bands on them. These are ways to identify them. Martial eagles are virtually impossible to identify as individuals without these leg bands. But what we've done is we've tagged 11 juveniles from known nests with these bands, and we did this 5 years ago. It takes juvenile martial eagles roughly 5 years to reach sexual maturity before they take a territory of their own. And we're now starting to get resightings of these birds, so knowing where they were hatched as a chick and now where they're taking up territory as an adult. And so this is, for instance, K4. I'll show you a quick story here. So this is a bird called 3E, and 3E we banded on the 30th of March, 2018, and down in Eserosopia, which is in the southeastern part of the Masai Mara National Reserve. We were really excited on New Year's this year. A friend of mine from Grumeti, who works for Singida, called me and said there's a martial eagle here called 3E. And it looks like 3E has taken up a territory in Grumeti. So hatched in the Mara and is now a territorial female in Grumeti. We're hoping we can really expand the sample size over the next few years in partnership with Vasco Nyaga at WRTI. Hopefully he'll do his PhD looking at juvenile martial eagle dispersal across Kenya. That's quite exciting. All right, moving on to just a little bit more of our species-specific projects. So we do a project on tawny eagles. We do this project in very close partnership with the Peregrine Fund, with Dr. Ralph Bao. So what we've done is we've put some transmitters on the backs of these eagles, and I'll just share with you a quick thing that we've learned about tawnies from the cattle and conservation perspective. I think most of you are very familiar with Nabosho. I hope you are. But Nabosho is a conservancy to the south of here. It's 200 square kilometers. Each color that you see here, green, red, yellow, and blue, represents the movement tracks of an adult female tawny eagle. So we can call this bird the green adult female, the red adult female, the yellow adult female, the blue adult female, right? This is 1 month of data at 1 second intervals. So it's very high resolution data. It's essentially every single movement the bird made during that month. What you'll find is that they're highly territorial, right? They don't cross each other. So these colors are like boom, 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 right? They really don't, they're extremely territorial. The other thing that you'll see is that in the core of the conservancy, in the center of the conservancy, the territory is much smaller. And that these birds that have their territories on the edge of the conservancies, their territories are much larger. You can also note that on the edges, on the parts of their territories that are outside the conservancy, they start falling apart. So what that means is they're not as territorially defended. And what that means is that there are no tawny eagles here. Right? So in Pardamat, and I'll talk more about this later, we don't think there's a single tawny eagle breeding in Pardamat. There's not a single territorial bird here. And that's quite something. Anyway, but the most important piece of information here is just like marshals, tawny eagles are very sensitive to people. And you'll see these dots are their nest locations for these pairs. And what you'll find is that in the center of the conservancy, they're putting their nest in the center of their territory. And that means that they are most afraid of other tawny eagles. But here, on the edges, on pairs that we call edge pairs, they're putting their nests towards the center of the conservancy, not towards the center of their territory, which tells us they're more afraid of people than other tawny eagles. You guys see that? So these cores of these conservancy areas, the most protected areas where we manage grazing, where we manage development, are very, very vital for raptors. Without them, we will lose our raptors. Okay, another project we do in close partnership with Dr. Ralph Bao and the Peregrine Fund is we study little Wahlberg's eagles. These species are interesting because they're intra-African migrants. So they breed here in the Mara, and we didn't know where they went, but now we do. And so we're partnering with researchers in South Africa, researchers in Nigeria, researchers all over Africa, because this species is very widely spread. And what we found in the Mara is all of our birds, in about April or May, they fly, northwest, and they spend 3 months on the border of Sudan and South Sudan. And then in August, they fly back to Kenya. And we had no idea that our birds went there up until a few years ago. So this was a very exciting thing. We now know where all Wahlbergs go, and we can start thinking about how we can protect them. What's interesting in the Mara, just a little piece of information, is Wahlberg's eagles are not breeding in this part of the Mara. They only breed in areas with broadleaf woodland. So this part of the Mara has very limited broadleaf woodland, mostly acacia. So Nabosho, Atamoja Hakuna, right? Okinye, there's no woolbugs. But the moment you get into the reserve and you get, broadleaf trees, things like Osokonoi, right? Or Chartuyan, Woolberg's eagles like to nest in those types of trees, right? Cool. Okay, so I mentioned 4 things we do, and I realize time is running. I like to talk, Pole. Nest monitoring. Nest monitoring is a very, very important part of our program. Duncan just walked in with Matthias. They've been hard at work nest monitoring in Nabosho. And we got Danson Raqua in the back, who's been helping out Becca in Pardamat. Lemaine does the reserve. We're looking to hire people elsewhere in the Mara, but nest monitoring is really, I think it's the future of our project. And it's where we're putting in most of our effort now. So why nest monitoring? So the first reason is through nest monitoring, we can guide conservation decision-making. So nests are valuable real estate. If we know where nests are, we can work with management to protect those nest sites. So we can guide how decisions are made at the management level to protect habitat. Does that make sense? So we can go to a conservancy manager and say, you have a nest of a critically endangered bird right here. No roads, no camps, protect that area. Make sense? The other thing we can do is monitor population trends. So sometimes protecting nests is not enough. And through monitoring nests, we can actually see populations declining, and we can start asking the questions, why are they declining? And how can we protect these birds beyond protecting their nests? So for instance, if we start seeing vulture populations in Nabosho plummet over the next 5 to 10 years, we know that protecting Nabosho is not enough, and that there needs to be more conservation action done on the outside. Maybe we need a reimagined anti-poisoning campaign, things like that. This is an important one to me, but in the grand scheme of things, it might not be hugely important, but inform conservation statuses. So if you guys have heard of critically endangered, least concern, we lack really robust data sets to uplist or downlist these species. And we're hoping that our nest monitoring data sets from the Mara can form one of the foundations for informing conservation statuses with the IUCN. And then a fourth one, and this goes back to kind of single species research, but we hope that we can improve our understanding of basic population ecology for these species. So for instance, Matthias is in the back now. Matthias is studying nest site selection of lappet-faced vultures and white-backed vultures. So he's using our nest monitoring data set to ask a question focused on species ecology from a conservation angle. So why are lappet-faced vultures nesting in these trees and these areas? Why are white-backed vultures nesting in? Are they afraid of people? How afraid of people are they? And how can we build conservation plans to protect these species? I think it's very valuable work. So a funny question, what is a nest? And a lot of people just go, it's just a bunch of sticks in a tree or sticks on a cliff. A nest is a bird's home. And nest locations, nest real estate is very, very, very valuable. A good nest tree is worth a huge amount from a conservation perspective. To give you guys some perspective, there's a species of raptor called a gyrfalcon. Gyrfalcons breed in the high Arctic, and they've done some carbon dating of guano, so bird poo, at the very base of a gyrfalcon nest on a cliff in Iceland. And I want to say that guano was dated thousands of years ago. So which means that nest has been in use for thousands of years. So these nest trees in the Mara, when we see a nest in a tree, a good tree, those nests can be used for generations of birds, decades, even longer. And so protecting individual trees might sound trivial, but it can be incredibly important. In many ways, we do not know why birds are choosing those nests. And we need to ask the question, why aren't they? We look around us here at WTC, I can see some very nice trees, but none of these trees are suitable for raptors. Why? Because WTC is here, right? And that's not a problem. WTC needs to be here, but these are the types of things we're interested in. Nests are very, very valuable. This is the Vero's eagle owl, by the way, on the left. And that's a martial eagle in her nest on the right. That's the largest martial eagle nest we found in the Mara. If you think about how big a martial eagle is, a 2-meter wingspan, like a meter tall. That nest is 2.5, 3 meters deep, 2 meters across, 1.5 meters across. These are a lovely pair of secretary birds on their nest. Secretary birds and lappet-faced vultures will often change nests, which is a lovely thing. Just a small point for fun is a nest doesn't belong to a species. Does that make sense? So that's not a martial eagle nest. That's a nest being used by a martial eagle. Make sense? Okay. So how do we monitor nests? So the first thing we do is nest detection and ID. So we drive around, walk around, picky around, do whatever we do, and we look for nests. And the way we track our effort when we do that, so we track, where we've walked, where we've driven, how far we've driven, how fast we've driven, and we look for nests as we go. When we find a nest, we collect a whole bunch of information about that nest. So its location, the tree species, the nest position, the nest height, all of this information. We put that on, we give that nest the nest ID, which is what we see on the right. So every nest in the Mara that we know of has an ID. And then that's the part of nest detection and ID. And then we also follow up and monitor those nests. So we call that the nest check. So we've got nest detection and ID, and then we've got nest check. So once we know where a nest is, we go to that nest. We check the status of the nest. So is the nest inactive? Is it active? And what we mean by active is what species is using it. Are there eggs, chicks, or is the chick fledged? And is there an outcome to it? So has the nest been a success or a failure? Has the chick died? Has the chick fledged? These are all things we're looking at. And we have a really fun method for checking nests. And as you can imagine, sometimes nests are very hard to look into and you don't really know what's inside. Sometimes we use a telescopic pole. So that's with a GoPro mounted onto it, so we can peek inside and see what's in it. The method is very delicate. You have to be very, very careful with that method because you can also disturb the birds. And so it's something we do very cautiously. But to provide you with an example, this is all photos taken with a nest pole. So this is a white-headed vulture, so one of our most critically endangered birds in the Mara. 2nd July 2020, the nest was inactive. 10 September, there was an egg. 22 October, there was a small chick. 22 November, a bigger chick. 22 December, an even bigger chick. And 12 February, the chick fledged. So we do this for hundreds of nests across the Mara all the year. And we build this data set for management and for conservation. So to give you an idea, Lemaine works mostly in the Masai Mara National Reserve. And this was his effort in 2022. In 2022, we didn't measure our tracks. We've implemented that this year. But you can imagine that, he's driven this entire area so many times. But in the Masai Mara National Reserve, there are 352 nests. And in 2022, Lemaine did 1,588 nest checks within that reserve. It's a huge amount of work. I mean, it's exhausting. And sometimes to get to one nest can be really challenging. I mean, it can really be a mission, especially when it's raining. So to give you guys an idea of some of our data, so this is from the reserve. So in 2020, we found 22 lappet-faced vulture nests. 14 were successes, 8 were failures. In 2021, we found 32 nests. 21 were successes, 11 were failures. In 2022, we found 38 nests. 20 were successes and 18 are failures. The problem with this data is from year to year, the data is not comparable. We're fixing that this year because we didn't account for our effort. So a product of this increase is actually our increased knowledge. So we're not at the point yet saying that vulture populations are increasing, not at all. That's not where we're at. Right now, our effort and knowledge and our ability to collect data is improving and increasing, but we're working on that. Hopefully next year, we can actually start comparing data from year to year, which will be very interesting to do. This is Pardamat. This is a map that Becca and Duncan and Danson have been working on. These blue lines show effort. So running around the conservancy here, there's a lot of fences in Pardamat, as you know, so you can't survey everywhere. There's also not a lot of good nesting habitat in Pardamat. So there are lots of areas that there's just no point of surveying. So there's no trees for these birds to nest in. But what you'll find in Pardamat is that there are very few nests. I think in total, there are 3 active nests that we found in all of Pardamat. In comparison to Naborsho, we have 120 nests and 70 some are active, right? 70, 80 nests are active. So you've got Naborsho with all of those nests and Pardamat with 3. But what we're hoping is that we can change that here through management. And that working with Jackson, Sasine, working with Basecamp, working with community, the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust, the Mara Raptor Project can work alongside community to bring raptors back to Pardamat because they were here. And so the other day, Danson and Becca were riding around and they had a glimmer of hope of what I think Pardamat could be. And they found a crowned eagle nest in Pardamat, which is a very, very special bird. And in the Mara, there are very few crowned eagle pairs. But I think this does give us a kind of okay, great. We can do something here in Parliament. Let's bring these birds back. Let's promote coexistence with community. Because I think if birds can't coexist with us, we're in trouble. All right. A byproduct of nest monitoring is that once in a while we can rescue an individual bird. And at the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust, we really do believe that every individual matters, especially when you're dealing with declining species. So Bob and Gina Poole were filming this nest with Joe Schofield, and they walked up to the nest one morning and realized the nest had fallen out the tree and the chick was on the ground. And so thanks to Bob and Gina and Joe and the Mara Conservancy, we were able to put that nest back up into the tree and stick the chick back up in the nest, and the chick fledged. So a byproduct of nest monitoring is sometimes you can intervene in these situations and actually help get chicks out of nests. Every chick matters. Okay, poisoning response. Poisoning, as I said, is one of the greatest threats to vultures in the system. And one thing we're very proud of at the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust is that we like to consider, at least ourselves, some of the experts in the country in responding to poisonings and in rehabbing birds. We do this work in close partnership with lots of other people. So the Peregrine Fund is one of our close partners, BirdLife International, Nature Kenya, Kenya Wildlife Service, a whole bunch of conservancy rangers. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention all of these partners. Mara Predator Conservation Program does a huge amount of poisoning work, anti-poisoning work in the Mara. But poisonings kill so many birds. You can imagine raptors produce one chick a year, vultures mostly, one chick a year. So when a poisoning kills 70 birds, and we're only dealing with a population, a few hundred birds, a poisoning is just dramatic. There was a poisoning in Botswana a few years ago that killed 500 vultures. It will take decades and decades and decades to rebuild those numbers. There was a poisoning in West Africa and Guinea that killed 3,000 hooded vultures. I mean, you're talking about irreplaceable loss. And so poisons, sumu in particular, the worst thing in the world is poison, really. And it just has devastating effects. I think the bad thing too about poisoning is an entire community can agree to not use poison. It just takes one person. One person who got fed up with a hyena, throw out a carcass, can kill all the vultures in an area very, very quickly. And so it's a really, really tough battle to fight. The good thing is, though, is we have some real conservation heroes in the Mara. This is Timothy Fiololo and Nathan Capes. Nathan Capes works for Older Kessie Conservancy, and Timothy works for Nabosho. But these two gentlemen are considered real heroes in the Mara. They're out there on the ground finding poisoned vultures and rescuing them. One thing to know about vultures is when they're poisoned, they'll often fly. And so when they fly, they can fly vast distances and then succumb to poisoning. So in Nabosho, we find a lot of poisoned birds because they're coming back to Nabosho for safety, for roosting, for nesting. And then they succumb to poison in the conservancy. And that's when we find them. So the poisonings have happened outside the Mara in places we don't know. But these gentlemen are real heroes. Timothy and Nathan are not only rescuing birds, but they're doing the rehab, they're doing the pumping stomachs, giving medicine, trying to keep these birds alive. It's not fun work, it's not easy work, but it's really, really rewarding work. We're building what we call temporary holding facilities around the Mara to hold birds that have been poisoned. Duncan was learning about rehab the other day. We had a lot of fun with a laffet had come in. Just yesterday, Lemaine had a poisoned laffet in the reserve that unfortunately died. And so we're finding poisoned birds constantly. It's just constant. And we have these temporary holding facilities to hold these birds because you can imagine keeping a big vulture is not exactly easy. This is an interesting story. So this was a bataleur that was poisoned. This is Lemaine. So Lemaine rescued this bataleur with Mara Raptor Rangers. This is our temporary holding facility in Older Kessie where the bataleur went. And then this is Lemaine releasing this bird. See this plays. You can see that bataleur taking off. So Simon Tomset from the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust rehabbed that bird. Lemaine was able to get that bird to Simon. Simon really is a genius when it comes to rehabbing birds. But that lappet is now flying free and it's got a transmitter on it. And we're monitoring that bird and we found its nest. And so this just shows poisoning rehab response. It does work. Birds do go back and they do go back to their territory. So this is this bird's territory. This is the C12, the main road into the Mara. Nkwelale is like here. This is Mara Raptor Conservancy, formerly known as Olaro South Conservancy. This bird is back in business on territory after a successful rehabilitation process. So capacity building. So I spoke a little bit about earlier what we mean by capacity building, but I think really broadly what our vision for our project is this, and that is we divide the Mara up into blocks, and each block is given to an individual, and that individual becomes the Raptor champion for that block. So within that block, they are the ones monitoring nests, responding to poisonings, talking with community, leading the research project. So for instance, Duncan is an abortion, right? So that's where Duncan calls home. And I really, Duncan, you're the champion for Raptors in abortion. I hope you know that. And we're hoping that there can be people like that all across the Mara that the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust invests in and builds up to really be Raptor conservation leaders within the system. And so this is the Mara. This whole block system, we color-coded it here. Those blocks are slightly changing as we're learning more. So that block that you see there is a little bit different than in reality what we're building now. I need to update that map. But here's Duncan at hard at work being trained the other day in the reserve, and I mean in the bushel. So all of this work that I just shared with you wouldn't be possible without the support of lots and lots and lots of people. And this is just a small selection of our partners. And I'm very grateful to WTC and Share Screen Africa for hosting this presentation.